You think you know the story of the night I got screwed in Montreal, but you only know the beginning. That night wasn't just the end of my WWF career. It was the start of a new, much darker chapter for the entire wrestling business. This is the real story of how one moment of betrayal didn't just change my life, it twisted the whole industry into something new. To really get what happened, you need to understand what was going on back in late '97. The WWF was in a brutal fight for survival against WCW in the Monday Night Wars, and Vince McMahon was feeling the heat financially. I was the WWF champion, the hero, the guy who had broken his back for that company for 14 years. But things were changing. Vince, the same man who offered me a 20-year loyalty contract, came to me and said he couldn't afford to pay me anymore. He actually told me to go get a deal with WCW. So I did. The problem was my last day. It was supposed to be right after the Survivor Series pay-per-view, which, of all places, was in Montreal, my home country. And my opponent was Shawn Michaels, a guy I had real, legitimate heat with. Our rivalry wasn't just for show, it was personal. Shawn had even said to my face that he would never lose to me. So when it came time to plan the finish for our match in Montreal, I put my foot down. I'm a professional. I had no problem losing the title, but I would not lose it to Shawn Michaels. In Canada, after that level of disrespect, it was a matter of principle. Vince and I had a handshake deal. The plan we agreed on was a chaotic finish with a disqualification. I'd keep the title, hand it over the next night on Raw, and leave with my head held high. I trusted Vince. I trusted our referee, Earl Hebner, who swore on his kids' lives he wouldn't double-cross me. After 14 years of giving them everything I had, night after night, I let myself believe they wouldn't do that to me. That was a big mistake. The night of November 9th, 1997, the Molson Center was electric, buzzing with nearly 20,000 of my hometown fans. The match with Shawn started, and even with all the real-life animosity, we were putting on a classic. The plan was for a complicated sequence leading to a DQ, but we never got there. Late in the match, Shawn put me in my own finishing move, the sharpshooter. That was part of the plan. I was supposed to reverse it, leading to a big brawl, but then something happened that nobody saw coming. I saw Vince McMahon at ringside yelling at the timekeeper to ring the effing bell, and then I heard it. The bell rang. Earl Hebner called for the bell, saying I'd submitted, but I never tapped, not for a second. In that moment, confusion turned to pure rage as I realized what they'd done. Shawn grabbed the belt and ran out of there like a coward, pretending he knew nothing, while I was left in the ring, stunned and betrayed in front of my own people. I looked over at Vince, the architect of it all, and in a moment of pure, unscripted fury, I spat right in his face. I destroyed thousands of dollars of TV monitors at ringside because what they did was a complete violation, both personally and professionally. The line between the show and real life was gone. The chaos didn't stop when I went through the curtain, and let me tell you, the only reason Vince McMahon dared to face me backstage was because of The Undertaker. Taker was the conscience of the locker room, and he pounded on Vince's office door, demanding he go and face me like a man. Vince wouldn't have listened to anyone else, so there he was, standing in my dressing room, trying to act like his hands were tied. It was a gamble, and he lost. I wasn't a hothead, but I'd been pushed past my limit. We didn't exchange many words. We actually tied up like a wrestling match, and then I did something I'll never regret. I threw one perfect uppercut that lifted him right off the ground. He went down out cold. I messed up my hand on the punch, but it was worth it. To this day, I believe it was the best thing I ever did. He deserved every bit of it. It was the only way I could reclaim a piece of the dignity that had just been stolen from me.
That one night in Montreal sent ripples through the business that are still felt today. It changed everything. We're about to get into the real legacy of what happened, so if you're finding this interesting, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter on wrestling history. Now, let's talk about what Montreal really did to wrestling. The Screwjob wasn't just about one match. It fundamentally changed the DNA of wrestling. Before that night, there was an unwritten code, a trust between the promoter and the top guys. That trust was completely shattered. The term Screwjob became a household word in wrestling, and the curtain was pulled back for good. Fans were suddenly aware of contracts, backstage politics, and the fact that the lines between reality and entertainment could be erased at any time. The ironic part? The person who benefited the most was the man who planned the whole thing. The real-life heat on Vince McMahon was huge. Instead of running from it, he leaned into it. He transformed himself from a commentator into the evil corporate tyrant. Mr. McMahon. That character, born from a real-life betrayal, became the ultimate villain for the Attitude Era. His feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin, another guy who had no problem fighting the boss, became the biggest rivalry of a generation and shot the WWF to heights they'd never seen. They took the worst moment of my career and turned it into their most profitable storyline. It revived the WWF, but the business became more cynical, and that trust between wrestlers and management was a wound that, for many, never healed. For years, I looked at Vince McMahon as a kind of father figure. Even after Montreal, a small part of me respected that he showed up in the dressing room to take his medicine. But that respect is gone now, completely. Our relationship was non-existent for over a decade. We eventually put together a storyline for a WrestleMania match, trying to put a fictional bow on a real-life wound. But the trust was never really there again. With all the horrific allegations and lawsuits that have come out against him in recent years, any shred of respect I had left is gone. It's tainted. I'm honestly embarrassed that I ever thought so highly of him. Hearing the details of what he's accused of is just sick and disgusting. I now believe he became a predator who used the wrestling business as a backdrop for his own evil. He's not the tough businessman I once knew. He's become a pathetic figure, a joke, like a Harvey Weinstein or a Jeffrey Epstein. If Vince offered me his hand today, I wouldn't shake it. I have absolutely zero respect for him. As far as I'm concerned, he can rot in hell. The long road to reconciliation. My view on Shawn. My relationship with Shawn Michaels was just as broken, but it took a very different road. For over a decade, the bitterness was intense. He played his part in the Screwjob, and for a while he denied it, which only made it worse. He was the one who held me in the submission, the one who walked out with my title. But time and tragedy have a way of changing people. Shawn retired after a back injury, became a born-again Christian, and started to make amends for his past. I suffered a career-ending concussion, followed by a stroke that nearly took my life. Those kinds of things give you a whole new perspective. The real turning point for me was watching Shawn's WrestleMania match against The Undertaker. Even with all the animosity I still had, I couldn't deny it was one of the greatest matches I had ever seen. That's when I decided I needed to let the anger go. In January 2010, we met in the middle of a WWE ring, live on Raw. We shook hands, we hugged, and we finally buried the hatchet. It wasn't a stunt, it was real. It felt like a weight had been lifted off both of our shoulders. Since that day, we have been friends. I still wish the bad history never happened. I wish I'd never left for WCW, a move that ultimately led to my career-ending injury. But the reconciliation with Shawn was genuine, a necessary closure to one of the darkest times of my life. The Montreal Screwjob is more than just a famous moment in wrestling. For me, it was the theft of my legacy. It was an abrupt, ugly end to a career I had built on integrity. It robbed me and the fans of what could have been some of the best years of my career and sent me down a path to WCW, where my talent was wasted and my in-ring career was cut short. It was a betrayal that haunted me for years. But its legacy is complicated. It gave birth to the Mr. McMahon character and arguably saved the WWF. It also created a generation of wrestlers who learned they could never fully trust the business. My own feelings have evolved from pure rage to something more complex. There's forgiveness for Shawn, who changed as a man. There is only contempt for Vince, whose true character has now been exposed to the world. And for me, there's a sense of peace knowing that I stood my ground for what was right. I was always a WWE guy, and I gave everything I had to that company. I did the right thing that day, and in the end, that's a legacy no one can ever screw me out of.